Good afternoon. Glad to be with you here live on this live Just Nation program. My name is Reverend Gregory Holston, and Just Nation is a program dedicated to issues of faith, justice, and policies across the city of Philadelphia and beyond. Happy again to be here with my co-host, Nia Holston, on this special program, which is the second part of our discussion about voting and elections. And glad to be again here with this great panel as we go forward to discuss the issues of importance and why voting is so important. Again, my co-host Nia Holston is also here.
Yeah, welcome everyone. We're so glad to have you with us today. The discussion was so fruitful, our part one, that we wanted to bring our guests back because we didn't feel like we had enough time to really dive into some of the very deep issues, the complicated feelings, the energy, the excitement, the mix of emotions that are at play here in this presidential election and the general elections writ large, because as we know, it's not just about the president, it's not just about the federal elections, it's about the state races as well. And so we really wanted to have the opportunity to really have a deeper dive into some of the nuances of these discussions, really with the goal of trying to promote advocacy for our communities.
Yes, absolutely. So why don't you introduce our first guest?
Yes, so we have to my left, Saudia Durant. Saudia, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Saudia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm based in West Philly. I've been doing youth and community organizing in Philly for a while. Right now I do justice work, so I help young people working on campaigns to end the school to prison pipeline, to get ICE removed from schools, and I also work on school funding campaigns.
All right, great.
So glad you're with us.
Thanks, glad to be
For this
here.
great part too. And to my right, Wendell.
Yes, hi, my name is Wendell Royster, Vice President of SEIU Healthcare Pennsylvania, and also one of the founders of Philadelphia Labor for Black Lives Coalition. Been in the organizing field for the last 18 years with SEIU, and on the doors with this campaign right now for 2024.
And Sister Fields.
Hello, my name is Linda Fields, and I have been organizing for the last 40 years. I was a senior organizer for the National Union of Hospital and Healthcare Workers, as well as advisor to Local 332. I was elected to the DNC, so I represented our state locally and nationally. I created a Black Caucus for Montgomery County, in which I've been living in for the last 24 years. Founded several youth organizations and I sit on the board of the YWCA. I'm the former president of the board of the YWCA Tri-County. And I'm just a mother, wife, sister, friend that wants to see democracy.
Yes.
And I will continue to fight for it for as long as I have breath.
Yeah, and thank you for again being here. So first, we want to just get some of the logistics out the way about dates that people need to be aware of coming up, like when is the last day to register to vote. If you're not registered, you have to register to vote. And also dates for mail-in ballots, when you have to have your mail-in ballot in. People recognizing that it's really election day every day right now, because with mail-in ballots, people can vote right now. You can go right down to your election office and get a mail-in ballot and vote right now. You don't have to wait till election day. And of course, the election date itself, November 5th.
Yes.
And so we share those dates, and also as we share those dates, tell us about what you're hearing on the ground when you're talking to people. What are they telling you about the election as we go forward? And let's start with Linda.
Well, I've hosted two watch parties with debates. We do community education and voter registration, and what I'm hearing is some good and some bad. Some people understand, but what I get the feeling that voter education is the key to all of this. A lot of folks do not understand that they have to research. They have to understand who they're electing, especially the down ballot, starting with the school board and working our way up through from the state level to the federal level to the presidency, because without a good foundation, we're not going to have the results that we would like to have. And understanding what democracy really represents for us and what our voting rights represent to us. So what I'm getting and what I'm hearing is people are watching TV and they can't distinguish sometimes the lie from the truth. And that comes in, that comes where you have to really research. You really have to understand the roles of each one of your representatives and what their responsibilities are. The president's responsibility is not the same as the vice president's responsibility. Your Congress is not the same as the vice president and the president. Your House representatives, the Senate, is not the same as congressional. So you have to understand the roles and responsibilities of each one of those areas, so when you need the help and you need the guidance, you know who to go to get the resources that you need to get what you want and need from your legislators. So education is the key to me, and I'm finding that there's a lot still people that just do not understand the truth from the lie, and that comes in researching and looking at the voting records of your representatives.
So yes, if I can, I want to just start off with saying the last day to register to vote is October 21st. Folks must get registered before October 21st in order to vote Tuesday, November 5th. Then you have the last day to actually receive a mail-in ballot, and that's October 29th. Again, I would urge people not to wait to October 29th to do a mail-in ballot. I would say try to get out there and get your stuff taken care of way before. Me, I voted already. Me and my wife voted already. So there's a couple things that I just wanted to unpack, and I think your question was key of like what are we hearing on the doors, and as we are,
because you have an organization that literally is sending hundreds of people out every day, knocking on thousands of doors across the city.
That's true, and if you can, let's take a step back because this race is unique. What happened was 2 months ago, Joe Biden decided to back out of the race, and then we put forth Kamala Harris, our vice president, to run for presidency. So what we're hearing is a lot of people don't know a lot about her. It's a shift from what they knew to what we have on, on the ballot now. What we are hearing is that it's quite a difference now because the Democratic Party has really did something that I thought would never happen, is that they would change course, right? And when they changed course, the Biden IDs that we already had, we had to go back.
What's an ID?
An ID is when we make phone calls and door knocks, and we have the person that we talked to that we got in contact with, and they were ID'd as either a Biden voter or they was ID'd as a Kamala Harris voter or the other guy, right? So the way that we do our data, that's what ID in a person means. It means the results of the conversation that we had, and they are leaning towards or saying that they're voting for the particular person.
Yes.
So we have ID'd a lot of Biden voters prior to the change that just happened 2 months ago. And we had to go back and have another conversation with those same folks about, did you hear that we have a different candidate now? And went through that whole spiel to re-identify them as Kamala votes. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
So what we are hearing is, again, people don't know too much about her. The loud noise and that drum beat of the opponent, Donald Trump, is loud, but we have a lot of support for our candidate, which is Harris. What's happening is on the streets, some of the young black brothers are disenfranchised. you have a lot of women that's very excited about this chance of having a black woman president. And some of the things that really like irks me to my soul, I'm just gonna say it, is like when people are not educated, like Ms. Linda said, they tend to lean to what they know. And sometimes that's the easy way out. And right now, I'm into leaning into having tough conversations with people because we know what the choice is. So what have we been doing? We've been doing a couple things, but I'll let others fill that question, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yes. So the question is about, again, is what are you hearing on the ground? What are regular folks saying about this election?
Yeah, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of different things. I'm hearing a lot of excitement, particularly after the last presidential debate. I'm hearing a lot of they're two sides of the same coin, and I'm hearing a lot of I don't want my vote to just be because she is a black woman. So there's some people who are like, I'm very excited about a black woman candidate, and there's some people who are like, I'm tired of the Democratic Party, and I don't just want my support or non-support to be taken for granted. I'm also hearing a real disappointment about some of the issues, particularly the international issues and the responses of both parties, because it's not just one. And so I'm hearing a lot of different things. And I think we can pick up on the thread of, what does it mean to have a black woman in this race, and how conflicting that might feel for some people, where it's like you want to hold them to account, and so you're also very aware of the realities of the situation, but then also feeling a mix of emotions that might include pride, that might include, some surprising emotions. For me, there's, as a criminal defense lawyer, there's, feelings about prosecutors and all of that, and this prosecutor versus the felon narrative and how that's come apart. But I also then have this current of watching the debate, being very transparent and being like, wow, she did a great job. And, that's not an easy feat. So I think for me, it's a mix of emotions, but that's also what I'm hearing on the ground. Excitement, some ambivalence, some feelings of, well, they're two sides of the same coin, and some very principled stances. Yeah, how about you, Sadia?
Yeah, I mean, I think I see a lot of bits and pieces mixed in that you all talked about. I think there's a lot of internal conflict, I think, with folks on the ground who consider themselves working class people or poor working class people versus those who see themselves as more middle class or upper middle class and who they vote for. I think I do hear a lot of pieces about their two sides of the same coin, and I think that is something that, to your point about like, there needs to be a lot of education about the difference between fascism and like a liberal Democrat.
Exactly.
Yes.
Like, I think obviously we see Trump as someone who wants to use the government to facilitate whatever he wants and whatever the white supremacist rhetoric is, and that's very distinct from, I think, I think there's similarities in some ways maybe in what people see with having presidential leaders who aren't accountable to the people who voted for them in. I think that's a similarity that folks feel. It's like, if we vote for Harris, she can make commitments now that 2, 3, 4 years later, she won't follow through on, and there's no way to hold her accountable when she's in office. I do think there is a very distinct difference between fascism and what we've dealt with, through the Obama administration or even through Biden, that I think shifts the conversation pushes us to really help people make important decisions. Like, there are folks who could get deported, immediately once Trump is elected, seeing a lot of the rhetoric about Haitian communities, right, Mexican communities. So I think that feels really important. I think people feel very frustrated that the Democratic Party has not seemed to at least at the national level, has not sharpened its politics, whereas the conservative right is has gone back to their very conservative agenda of like not wanting, you know, Black and brown folks to have access to public education, you know, not wanting certain folks to have access to jobs, housing, all of that, book bans, right? I think people see the conservative right being very clear about what their ideology is. And I think with the Democratic Party, I think a lot of people feel divided internally. Like some folks are like, hey, we want to abolish the death penalty, right? Seeing a Black man sentenced to death in the last couple of weeks, all the evidence showing that his DNA had nothing to do with it, still sentenced to death. Seeing prisons, seeing international wars, seeing things like what's happening in the Congo and Sudan and Palestine. I think people feel very frustrated that the Democratic Party feels very reductionist, I think sometimes in terms of its politics, and that there needs to be a deepening and a sharpening around. There's a lot of things, but I think that's a lot of the conflict.
Thank you so much.
And we have an additional guest. So he joined us for part 1, and we're so glad to have him for part 2. So Serge, why don't you introduce yourself quickly before you answer the question?
Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Serge, Sergio Highland. I'm executive assistant at the Abolitionist Law Center, also an organizer with the Pennsylvania Working Families Party. And so I came kind of late, so.
That's okay, that's okay.
What the question is basically, what are you hearing on the ground? You're involved in knocking on doors and talking to people. What are they telling you?
Yeah, so I'm hearing much of the same things. Like I was listening to Saudia just now, and there's just a bunch of different opinions within. Most of the people we talk to are Democrats because of the city that we live in, but there's a bunch of different opinions in the Democratic Party. There's, I think a lot of people have been conditioned to believe that a man should run the country. And so when you have this powerful Black woman with experience now being presented as the, you know, possibly the next president, people are confused. Some people are afraid. Some people go back into their traditional beliefs, and you know, they just don't want to be involved. But there is a lot of confusion, but there's also a lot of support. There's a lot of excitement. I hear young people, for the most part, who are really excited that Kamala Harris could be the next president of the United States, and rightfully so, because it gives people, I guess, whether you believe in her politics or not, it gives people the sense that things are possible, and that doors are being opened for people to enter who could potentially make some sort of changes in the future. So, you know, we're just hearing there's a lot of different opinions.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
And I think the one point that you made, Saudia, that was really something that I noticed is the conservatives, they are united on one ideology.
Yep.
And I've noticed that Democrats, it's like, there's so many different factions and so many different opinions and beliefs, and that's a problem to me right there.
And even if the conservatives are not completely united, they'll say things like, well, I still want to consolidate power.
Right.
And so I am willing to sell out my own beliefs and ideologies, or pretend that I actually care about an issue when in reality I don't.
Right.
Or maybe, you know, I actually have, you know, talking about abortion and the women's right to choose. Maybe I have had an abortion, but I'll still, you know, reject that right for other women because it benefits me. It puts more money in my pocket.
Right.
You know, the Republicans are the ones saying I'm going to get tax cuts for the wealthy and like boost development and all of those different things that, you know, really show how little care and empathy there is for our fellow human beings. But following up on a couple of things that you both said, Serge, you talked about the sexism inherent in all of this, right? And how, you know, in some ways, Kamala Harris has, you know, we know that because of intersectionality, the idea that, you know, people's race, people's genders, people's class, all comes to bear on how people are perceived in this country and beyond. But I'm interested to hear from the panel about what they think and what they've seen in terms of the sexism that has been experienced and how they push back on that, even if they may have some of their own reservations about Kamala Harris, the candidate. And then, Saudia, I just want to follow back up. You mentioned fascism, so I'm going to come back to you and ask that if you define fascism in the states that are against people. But let's just talk about the sexism question.
Well, the sexism I experienced because I ran for the Senate, and my own party didn't support me as much as I thought it should. Being the first black woman in Pennsylvania running for the Senate, I believe that the support should have been stronger. And it wasn't a question about my ability to lead, it was more about money. And so some things like that can have people disillusioned, and I got calls, thousands of calls about, well, why? Why does it have to be about money? So it's not just sexism, it's the economic piece of it too, and how we have made this a money issue rather than a real democracy issue and a real respect for a person that has the leadership and has shown the ability to lead and represent the people's voices, not the government itself, because that people get confused about the two. People want advocacy, people want results, people want answers. And when you have a person that has served and done those things and represented the people in your communities, male or female, you want that person. But the sexism has always dictated, the men always determine who does and who doesn't on both sides. That's not just on the Democratic side, but on the Republican side also. Historically, we have not been respected. And for a black woman, it's even worse.
Well, there's some men that need to get over it. Right, just straight up, they need to get over it. You have the most experienced person, maybe in the history of running for president. A DA of a large city, Attorney General of the largest state in the country, a senator from that state, and now a vice president. There is nobody, whether you look at Reagan or Carter or any of them that I ever seen, have ever had that level of experience that she has had, and still being questioned, still being commented, people still asking questions about her intelligence, who have never had this kind of level of education and experience in government before. Men need to get over it.
Well, to your point as attorneys, the key for me for Kamala is the fact that she wasn't just a prosecutor. And the brothers that are upset about her and her doing her job as a prosecutor, they have to look at what her responsibilities were, what was presented to them, what the cases look like, and none of them have done that. I have family members, and not only was she a prosecutor, but she was also a public defender. She defended people. She defended their rights. And so you have to look at the whole part of it, not just a portion that you have an issue with. I find that a lot of the folks that I have spoken to, and I've been out there, in these last months I have been out there, they're not even registered to vote. And they have the loudest voices and the biggest opinions.
Received. I can just say sexism shows up a lot, and it has showed up in this race more than ever. But back to what you said, Reverend Alston, about men need to get over it. Let me just say, I come from a 85% union membership of women, healthcare union. So we service 25,000 members across the state of Pennsylvania, nurses, hospital workers, home healthcare aides, and nursing home workers. And I see every day women of leadership, of color, not of color, that really displays leadership with people's lives on a daily basis, but also displays love passion, joy, comfort as we're going through our health crisis, right? And when I think about sexism, I did run into quite a few conversations with a couple men out in the street about, this race, and have heard, that they don't think that a woman should be president. This one guy, 76 years old, I just talked to Saturday, came out and said the Bible said this, about a woman couldn't be a leader.
What it
And
says.
I
That's
know,
not what it says.
but I'm only saying what I'm running into.
As a minister
right?
of the gospel,
As
that
a-
is not
No,
what it
trust
says.
me,
As
I'm
a
standing
pastor
face
for
to-
25 years, it's hard when I hear people misinterpret the Bible. That's a whole nother. I think we got
Let me
a whole
tell you,
show on that.
That's a whole different show. But I just want to say, they need to get past it and they need to get over it, because this is the most qualified candidate out of these two that's running for the most important position in America
And
right
I would
now.
say probably one of the most qualified candidates ever.
Well,
Yeah,
I think I have to follow up on something, because I think there is in our communities a resurgence of a conservatism or
Yes.
like an openness of conservatism that is being pushed on us by social media. Even in the conversations that have nothing to do with politics, the debates between men and women and all of that you see on social media. So there is a real streak of conservatism, and I think that has been intentional from
Absolutely.
some bad actors.
Strategic.
But I do think, generally speaking, the efforts have been interesting related to Kamala and how her race intersects with her gender, because there is also a narrative of protect Black women. And what you see is the efforts by some people to say, well, we don't have to protect her because she's not Black, and to literally
Disqualify her.
deny everything else about her, because it's more convenient for you that way. You can keep your morals of protect Black women and this, that, and the third, as long as you don't believe she's Black. And so I think there are just a lot of interesting conversations that are being had, and we're seeing the ways internet, social media, misinformation, the intentional misinformation is impacting this race. We see that a lot. And so, but I did want to come back to
Can I, before you do that, which is a really important question, let's be clear. She's Black. All right, period.
Received.
Does anybody not think she's Black? So we can just have that conversation.
Received.
Another part of that is that people want to find a reason not to, and the other part of that reason is that she's married to a Jewish white man. Truth be told.
Yeah.
Look, I don't care too much about who people are married to. I'm what job you going to do for us? But she's Black. Her father was a Black Jamaican, African descent, and the fact that her father was an economic professor at Stanford University, honored, and her mother was also an incredible scholar and scientist. The fact that we're questioning her intelligence,
It's ridiculous.
y'all.
Yeah, I'm not even going to spend any more time
No more
on
time on
it.
that.
Yeah, go ahead, sister.
I'm sorry. I just
Yeah.
had to
No
make
more
it clear.
time on that.
There's anybody out there who are watching you're wondering, she Black, y'all.
Very
Can I
Black.
just comment on that real quick?
Yeah.
About some of the conversations that we're having, especially because
Yeah.
I engage with young people a lot. And when I say young people, I mean like people my age and younger. I'm 43, so that group of people. When the question of Kamala Harris's quote unquote anti-Blackness comes into play, what people are reading into that, how they're interpreting that is how the right is interpreting that to younger people is, yes, she is a person of color. However, her cultural experiences don't relate to yours. So in that sense, she's not Black. And that's how they are manipulating people with that narrative.
Got you.
There is a sexist element, of course. There's an anti-LGBTQ element. There's an anti-abortion element to this that conservatives paint as wrong. And they associate all of those quote unquote wrongs with Democrats. And then they tell young people, this is what your party represents, which is wrong. And what have they done for you? Which is why a lot of young people are rebelling and sort of espousing all of those false narratives that we're bringing up right now. So I just wanted to mention that because in these conversations, like this is what we hear from the rawest group of people, the people who maybe aren't quote unquote political, people who are just regular people who hear regular information, like you said in there, that get their information from social media or even the mainstream media, which can't always be relied on.
Well, again, just for the record, she was raised in Oakland, y'all, in the black section of Oakland, around black folk. She went to Howard University, y'all. She is an AKA, y'all. She is raised in black culture. Does not mean she doesn't respect her Indian culture. She respects that too, and we should want somebody to respect all of the cultures and learn from all the cultures they're a part of. But she was raised as a black person.
Okay, so I do want to come back to Saudia, some of what you said, because you noted a class distinction in some of this. And you noted that the last conversation we had where, there's maybe a class distinction in how people are responding to Kamala, maybe in how people say, maybe, and I don't want to read too much into what you're saying, but maybe, when it comes to international issues, when it comes to criminal justice issues, when it comes to immigration, people are willing to maybe let those slide, even if they don't agree with Kamala, because of that class divide, where they may feel like they're not going to be impacted. And I've been thinking about that a lot since you last shared it. And part of my response, and I want to hear from other people too, is that I do wonder if there's also another class divide of folks, knowing the material conditions for people are going to change for those who don't have money, or for our people, like point blank period, for all of us, right? So even if there is a class distinction, knowing the very real realities, and I'll speak frankly on this show, our current mayor, Philadelphia's current mayor, has evoked a specific intention to bring back constitutional stop and frisk, and to support the police 1,000%. And I can tell you, in my experience as an attorney, I have had conversations with different entities where they have said, well, because now she has opened the door to this, we will, we're going to try things at different tacks, so we're going to be tougher on crime. I've had people say that to me. And so I do think that in terms of the material conditions, I think it's the ripple effect of it all. It's choosing to support Donald Trump in this moment is going to have so many additional effects and ripple effects beyond what we can experience or understand in the current moment, that maybe also led to the death of Marcellus Williams or Khalifa, as he was known, right? And so all of those things, from my vantage point, I see them, and I see the material effects on people's lives and how people aren't getting relief, people aren't getting their convictions overturned, all of that.
Explain to the audience who Marcellus.
Marcellus Williams was a man on death row in Missouri, who was executed last week, despite the current prosecutor's office in the jurisdiction where he was convicted, pleading to review the case, to overturn the conviction, and the state attorney general, who was elected in that case, in that state, refused. They brought it to the higher courts. They kept refusing. The Supreme Court, who Donald Trump selected 3 justices they also refused. And so that had a material impact on his ability to get relief. And I believe if Donald Trump hadn't been elected, he would still be alive today. And so, you know, there's just a lot in here when we talk about these class distinctions. And so I just want to, I know I said a lot, but
Can
I
I
would.
respond to that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So a couple of things I just want to quickly name and respond in terms of this piece around sexism and thinking about Kamala. I think one, sexism is in every part of our society and our culture, right?
Absolutely.
It's in our
Yes.
households, it's in our schools, it's in
Yes.
the churches, it's in the streets,
Yes.
it's in the prisons. So while I'm not surprised that sexism, of course, would come up when a black woman or any woman, right, or someone goes for any sort of political spot, that's the culture, right? And a part of our organizing work and advocacy work, even with elections, is to teach about patriarchy and how harmful it is. I think that's one thing. I think another thing is sometimes valid critiques of people in political context then
Yes.
becomes, oh, well, this is this thing versus maybe you're actually rightfully being assessed critically and being critiqued. I think in terms of like, I've heard people say they feel Kamala has been anti-black because as a DA, she bragged about arresting parents for truancy charges, poor black parents who are choosing between going to work or taking their kid to school on time, and they chose to pay rent. So I think in terms of class, I think something that is real is that the Democratic Party, Kamala and Biden have always talked about being champions of middle class people of all races. The fact is there are poor working class people who are not going to benefit in a lot of ways directly by some of her policies and proposals. I think the healthcare piece about making medicine and prescriptions affordable is great. If you don't have a job and you don't have healthcare, that will not benefit you necessarily. If you are looking to buy a home, you may get some incentives as a first-time home buyer under Kamala. If you are homeless, if you can't afford to do anything beyond rent, that's not going to impact you. I think there are great pieces that feel very clear in terms of a woman's right to healthcare and access. I think some of the pieces around education, like for me, Trump is a fascist when you want to put out Project 2025 and eliminate the Department of Education.
Yes.
Schools are already barely making this the national and federal standards, let alone international standards. So having someone who doesn't believe in having any federal oversight, to me, is a fascist. Wanting to criminalize and kill journalists
Yes.
who are reporting live coverage, to me, is a fascist. I think there are things also about Kamala. People struggle with the fact that more undocumented people were deported under Obama and Biden than a Trump. Trump worsened the deportations,
Yes.
but that existed before he got elected. So I think there are very complex conversations that people are scared to have of like, if I say this, I will now be sexist. Maybe you might be if you're saying that, you know, a black woman shouldn't be president. You know, things like women are too emotional. And you don't think it's emotional to see how Trump, when he doesn't get his way in office, you know what I mean? Seeing all the different policies that he uses to his fault. Seeing a Clinton, you know, the list goes on,
Insurrection.
right? The war on drugs, insurrection, saying it'll be a bloodbath. I think there are certain sexist narratives that are more harmful to both men and women, right? Because men get underdeveloped and harmed by
Yes.
hearing things that are terrible about their mothers and their
Yes.
girlfriends and their wives. So I do think there's a need for poor working class and middle class black people in the Democratic Party to talk about how do both sides benefit, not just the middle class. And then we would see, to your point, the way the Republicans can be like, all right, we don't agree with everything Trump is saying, but he's our guy, we're pushing him. I think our parties struggle to think beyond what we have right now. Sorry, that was a lot.
No.
What's at
It was a-
stake?
it was a
What's
lot,
at
and-
stake?
And I just want to make sure we break some of that up. So for regular folk, fascism, what does it mean? If I put it in the simplest form, you can say, what is fascism?
Fascism to me is when a figure, it's usually a white supremacist narrative or a white supremacist figure, wants to eliminate the role of government and oversight to allow their own political agenda where there's no objections, there's no freedom of speech, there's no freedoms or liberties in terms of political conflict or even using a legal system for someone's rights. All that gets eliminated, right? We see state violence being used for a dictator to use political government
That's the
to their
word.
personal agenda.
I think
Dictatorship.
I think that's the
Dictatorship.
word I try to use instead of fascism. Dictator, because people tend to have an understanding.
Yes.
Oh, that's somebody who want to run everything and do everything their own way and not listen to anybody
No
else.
consequences.
What I fear is that some people already think about that since they don't know the system, they don't know, they haven't had civics in high school, and they don't know the legislative, executive branches, and they don't know the judicial branches, and they don't know what federalism is. They don't understand all these governments. They don't understand. They're wondering when they elect the president, why can't the president do whatever they want? And Donald Trump is saying, if you elect me, I'll do whatever I want. And so they're not even aware of the difference between a dictator and what it really means to be in a representative democracy.
And I'm going to step out there and say this. Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever, Green Party, whatever you're a part of, the biggest fear that government has is an educated citizen. Because if we're educated and we come together and demand the rights, our rights, that we assign them to by voting for them, means that you don't have the dictatorship, you don't have the fascism, you don't have the power to go against the people, the majority. And so when we come together as a people and empower one another through education and understanding how to utilize the system that is already there and make it work for us, it's reversed right now. We're working for them. It's not the way it should be. And I believe that we're here talking about what's at stake. What's at stake is dictatorship. What's at stake is a madman, and I'm saying it out loud, Donald Trump, a madman that wants to take over, and his own family members and Republican associates understand this. And that is why you see the people that work with him, his family members, and all the other folks that know we can't live like this.
But it's also a cultural thing too. And when I say like culture, I'm not talking about Black culture, like, because what I certainly don't ever want to do is pathologize Black people.
Right.
But what I am saying is I think there's a problem with American society where the individualistic nature of it, so, and then also the belief that everyone maybe one day can become a millionaire or a billionaire, and so they idolize billionaires when I personally think that no one should be a billionaire.
Right.
I think it is disgusting to hoard that much wealth when you walk by a person on the street every
Homeless.
single day and you pretend like they don't exist. I think that's disgusting. But to back it up, I do think there's, perhaps part of the appeal of Donald Trump is, well, he's a successful billionaire, and if he can be a success, maybe
He's a thief.
I can be too. And also, we don't, as a community, we have an issue with wanting, I guess, wanting to focus on the individual and the people we know. As long as my people are good, I'm good, rather than talking about what's going on with the folks at the border right now and how they're suffering, or talking about the folks who are incarcerated, talking about so many different issues where people are literally suffering and we're not doing anything about it. And so in terms of, going back to your point earlier about, they're seeing some of the policies of Kamala and wondering what will change. I don't necessarily look at it that way. I don't disagree with you, but I think what I'm looking at is what's going to happen. I'm looking at the fact that, the Grants Pass decision at the U.S. Supreme Court says it's now fine to arrest people for sleeping in public parks and on the streets.
Awful.
And that's something where it has demonstrably gotten worse for people.
Yes.
It absolutely has gotten worse. And so I think that's my overall point, but others step in.
Wendell, Serge, want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just think that, I think it is cultural, but like you said, I wouldn't want to like cast any negative aspersions on Black culture either, but American culture has a strong influence on Black culture.
Yes.
And that negativity seeps in, which is why we see a lot of Black men saying, I won't vote for a woman, because they've been trained to think like that. And so I was just listening to what you were saying about Sherelle Parker, the mayor of Philadelphia, and how, and by the way, she didn't say she supports police 1,000%. She said 1,001%.
Oh, yes, yes.
Just want to put that out there. But
Received.
I just really find it ironic that somebody like her, who is a Democrat, embraces a lot of the same policies that somebody like Trump embraces. And when she reinstituted the quote unquote constitutional stop and frisk, which is not constitutional, so one of the reasons why New York even stopped doing it. But when she did that, we saw what was probably stop and frisk first murder right away in Huntington Park. But I just think that our culture is overwhelmed by American culture because it promotes, like you said, the individualism so much. It has this false belief that anybody can get rich. All you have to do is just work hard and focus and don't worry about anybody else. Just worry about yourself, which we know is not true. But people strive for that, and it becomes dangerous. I told you before that I had a friend who said that they were voting for Donald Trump because he was able to walk into a bank and get a loan, and the loan was attributed to some law that Donald Trump had allegedly signed. And I don't know if that's true or not, but that's the narrative going around out there and on social media. And then you have Donald Trump taking advantage of some black cultural elements coming out to 50 Cent songs and things like that, which is drawing people in, particularly black males. So I think that just makes it a lot more difficult for somebody like Kamala Harris to sort of get votes or support from an element in our community.
If I can, I just want to change gears for a minute. Saudia had mentioned something about Project 2025.
And I'm glad you're doing that because we got about 10 minutes left in the show, and I really want to touch on that as we move closer to this live program. Go ahead.
Right. So before I get into Project 2025, I just want to say, as a Philadelphia born and raised, if you guys remember, Atlantic City was booming at one time, and Donald Trump tore Atlantic City apart, and they are slowly rebuilding now. You know, I just want to say that because no one talks about the things that he wrecked. You know, we so busy talking about what qualifications our candidate don't have or whatever the case may be, and I just wanted to just put that out there. For all Philadelphians, Atlantic City was our place to go at one time, and he tore the place up. I mean, it wasn't even no lighting at some of the buildings behind, some of the bankruptcies and things that happened. Fast forward, Project 2025 has been announced to us and exposed to us this year, but the program itself been going on for 10 years now.
Yep.
It was going on for 10 years now. And some of the things that's in it that kind of stand out to me is when you talk about, you know, giving the rich a different tax break than us, meaning middle class folks. That's a problem to me. You know, taking the education away and dumbing down our education system even more is a problem as well. You know, we talk about Head Start and Get Set for our kids, which is one of the major, you know, influences on our young youth as they start to develop who they are. To try to take away our education program is horrible because that's our number one way out of poverty. You know, is to educate ourselves. So some of the things that's happening that we have just been exposed to that's in Project 2025 has been going on for years now. Just so happen we have the whole document now. I just want to say to you guys that if he get an opportunity, Donald Trump get an opportunity to get a chance at presidency again, all the things that he wanted to do, he's not going to miss this time. This not no do-over. We're not getting, this is not a practice test and then you get a real test.
Done.
This is it. This is for all the cheese, the morals, the values, democracy, everything that we stand for is at stake right now. So I'm not the professor on Project 2025, but I have spoken to folks that actually educated me on those things. Me, Serge, and Reverend Halston just went to a teaching last week that was at the Philadelphia Masjid. You know, so we have our Muslim communities involved in this race. But I just wanted to just put in the middle of the room, Project 2025.
Well, certainly, when in terms of becoming a dictator, Project 2025 really outlines the strategy in which he would do that.
Exactly.
People don't understand that on January 6th, we were that close to a
losing.
dictatorship.
To losing everything.
January 6th,
My birthday.
2021, we were that close. The mob had taken over the Congress. The senators were evacuated. And the previous month, he did everything he could to flip the generals so the military would support him.
Yep.
He fired some of those generals, put them back in place, put others in place. Nobody on the military side would cooperate, and at least as well as we know, because the question is, how did that mob get to Congress in the first place without military? But so he missed. He couldn't do what he wanted to do. This time around, in Project 2025, he will fire all of the civil service employees. That's all the regular government folk. Anybody who's got a government job right now, which is a lot of black folk, your jobs are going to be threatened. And because he wants to get rid of everybody, tens of thousands of people, replace them with loyalists to him, so that when he declares martial law,
There it is.
that the military will be behind him, and that he already has the Republican Party behind him. They voted, remember, that the election was a fraud last time. They sided with him, the whole Republican Party. So he would have part of the legislature that will be with him. He could have the military. He would have all the civil service folk, and
the
he would
police.
declare martial law and control.
Yeah.
So that is outlined in Project 2025. So when I just want to be as clear as I can. Again, we got about 5 minutes left. This scenario being painted, where Donald Trump actually says, I'll be a dictator on day one, actually says,
You won't have to vote anymore.
you won't have to vote anymore. He actually tells people, that's what dictators do, and fascists do. They always tell you what they're going to do. That's part of the way they control the situation. They tell you what they're going to do. And when Maya Angelou said, when people tell you who they are, please believe them. Reagan never did this.
Never.
Nixon never did this. Neither of the Bushes ever did this. As bad as all these Republicans in the past have been, and they all have been bad, nobody has ever talked about taking over and being a dictator on day one. This election is different than any other election that I've ever experienced, and that, as far as I can see, is in history. And so if we don't get out and vote now, you're not voting for just a change in your neighborhood. You're voting for the ability to be able to change your neighborhood. Because if he comes dictator, you won't even have the ability, you won't have the power, the levers of power to change your neighborhood, because he will control all of that.
Yes. Well, I just need to say this. We're here to talk about what's at stake. Your freedom is at stake.
It is.
Your bank accounts can be seized. Where you live, they could take your homes. Everything that is embodied in the Project 2025 gives Donald Trump total power. Republicans understand it. Democrats, some understand it. But the majority of this country does not understand. Development, we talk about we want to develop our communities. That won't happen. The men in prison will then be subject to being let out to do the will of Donald Trump. the ones that are innocent, he'll kill them. Okay? Everything that we know that is America today will no longer be. And if you don't believe it, I feel bad for you. At the end of the day, we must save democracy by voting and keep control of our democracy and our country.
Okay, so we got 2 minutes left. Any of our guests want to add just for another 10, 30-second comment on Project 2025, Serge?
I think the best way for folks to fight back in the election is to vote and to join an organization. We need our own organizations and institutions. We have a lot of them in this country, and if we all participated in our own neighborhood community orgs, those are institutions that can replace the threats that we see coming at us, and that's how we build power.
And I can also say that we have the opportunity to build power first within our own household. Parents that have children that's of age to vote, build power about having conversations with your children first. So the first time that they hear about politics shouldn't be from us on the street.
Exactly.
Do your part, and then we be able to help us help them.
Yeah, I just want to say, none of us are free until all of us are free. So for those in my community who hold sexist ideologies, anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant ideologies, if government can find a reason to oppress and persecute them, they can find a reason to oppress and persecute you as well.
Absolutely.
And Nia, close us out, please.
Oh, thank you so much for watching. Please reach out if you have any questions or you're feeling like you're on the fence. Please don't hesitate to do that. We are so grateful that you tune in and so grateful for the opportunity to share with you all of what's going on. So we thank you. Deadline to register October 21st. Good night.